Isaac Sarason is a skilled hacker formerly employed by British Telecom-Sprint. With his health failing, Isaac did the only thing he could think of. He ran. He found a haven in a working-class district of the city known as Little Russia. There Isaac took on a new name, Ishmael. Within hours of his arrival, he was embroiled in the affairs of a brutal member of Lomidze organized crime family known as Leo. Convinced by a longtime friend, Frankie, to flee from his commitments to the Lomidze family, Isaac found himself hunted by the ruthless Leo. On a rooftop, far from witnesses, Leo murdered Frankie. Only through the use of his skills as a hacker was Isaac able to drive Leo off. Now wounded, alone, and far from help, Isaac depends on the kindness of strangers. What do you do when the only way to save those you love is through the use of proxies? Colbyjack.net is proud to present Firmware Proxy by Colbytrax. 19. I rested for an hour, my hands idly navigating me through the Brotherhood archives. The Brotherhood might only have been around for a dozen or so years, but their archives were a thing of beauty. Every tool developed to break, countermand, overcome, and control a network, server, or phone ever developed sat in the hidden file storage of that most nefarious group of ne'er-do-wells. One only needed patience and a bit of luck to find the right tool for the job. It is where I went for my tools and their updates. It is also where I found the sweetest bit of code I have ever seen. Modern phones aren't really phones. They're actually computers programmed to imitate phones. Most people forget that. They go about their day. They call their friends, send text messages, and make updates to their Power Talk listings. Basically acting like the social animals they are. They never realize that the magic box which makes this all possible is capable of so much more. Basically, they treat it like a phone. A smart computer owner will install custom firewalls, anti-intrusion software, and encrypt their connections. No one ever does that for a phone. I know I didn't. Most phones, especially cheap VoIP phones, come with a suite of basic security software. The security is enough to keep the average peeping Tom out of your phone, but not enough to keep a truly dedicated attacker out. Much like locks on doors, the security was designed to keep the honest person honest, not keep dedicated criminals out. And just as it's possible to overcome a really major lock with a rock to a decorative window, the same thing is possible with phone security. In the Brotherhood archives, I found my rock. It was well after midnight when I finished organizing my tools for the attack. I was on my fourth glass of sedative water, and my eyes burned from the glare of the television-turned monitor. I checked the time. I had been working on these guys for nearly 9 hours straight. I checked the VoIP access records which had accumulated during my time setting up my attack on David's phone, and found that of the 12 calls he had made and received, 5 of the recipients were in the red square. My map of the Leo network was growing by the hour. As a little extra reward for my patience and hard work, I discovered that Leo was also within range of the wireless switch. His phone's connection to the red square switch was very strong. The environment was filled full of juicy targets. I activated my phone breaker and began my assault. Actually, I did little more than lie back and watch as the software worked its magic. One after another, the phones fell to my attack, their owners not even aware they were under attack. According to the documentation for the software suite, PhoneTrap 11.91, there was a flaw in the way network updates were passed to the VoIP phone services. PhoneTrap 11.91 used that flaw to flood the phone with thousands of network updates a second, which in turn would eventually cause a buffer overload, allowing the software to gain root access to the phone's operating system. With root access, PhoneTrap 11.91 had complete control over the phone's services and operation. An injection of pre-made code into the proper network subsystem, and the phone would do anything the controller of PhoneTrap 11.91 wanted. What I wanted wasn't much. I wanted a copy of all the data which passed through the phone, which in this case meant a copy of every call made or received, as well as sites visited and applications ran on the phone. Sounds like a lot, but that sweet bit of code was the core reason someone had whipped up and maintained over the course of decades PhoneTrap 11.91. All I did was supply it with the data locker address I kept with the Gnomes of Zurich, and it did the rest 7 times in less than 3 minutes. Now I owned their phone traffic. No matter where they went, as long as the phone had access, I would receive a copy of what they were up to and where they had been. Even if they didn't make a call. That was the best part. If they so much as received an instant message, email, or a status update for their PowerTalk listing, I would get a copy complete with location information stolen from their phone's navigation system. In the end, tapping their phones was the best bit of work I had done in a long time. PhoneTrap 11.91 ended up telling me where Nona was. 20. With Leo, David, and 5 random guys' phones tapped, there was little for me to do but wait. I took advantage of the lateness of the night and the fact that from the register logs it appeared that Leo and David were drinking heavy and wouldn't go anywhere soon, to catch a few hours' sleep. I was awakened by the arrival of one of Ferran's men. He brought the same breakfast every day. A small insulated flask with barely a cup's worth of coffee, strong and bitter, a bottle of juice, usually apple, 3 sweet buns glazed with honey and walnuts, a bit of fruit, usually an orange, and an omelet containing what appeared to be the leftovers from a previous meal. He never spoke. He wore the smell of rotten fish under his much-patched, waterproof jumpsuit. He never smiled either. He just stared at me as if I were one of the machines in the hall beyond. No interest. No caring. Just a need to drop off my breakfast and get back to whatever he did to the catfish held in the tanks beyond my room. I pawed through my breakfast and fired up the Opemapo null. The system ran through its diagnostics and checks while I finished my breakfast. Breakfast done, and the Opemapo null certified clean, I looked over the data gleaned in the last 7 hours. Leo's phone was 3 blocks over from the red square, where it had been since 3 this morning. David's phone was across the street at the nesting doll, where it had been since 4. Stranger 1, 3, 4, and 5 were also stationary, at what I could only assume was their apartments. It was Stranger 2's location which raised my interest. Stranger 2 was at the red square. I slipped into the camera array of the bar and saw no one besides a pair of bartenders busy resetting the bar for another day. I checked the subset of cameras for the tea room at the back of the house. Breakfast was in full swing. 10 large tables were set up family-style with heaping piles of eggs and fried meats competing with glazed pastries, sundry breakfast fried breads, and ornate tea and coffee services. Bottles of Crimean wine stood ready for action at the center of each table. At least 100 men and women in the fashions of the well-to-do sat and talked around the tables. There was no way I was going to find my target without a bit of luck. It wasn't luck that allowed me to find my target. It was his actions. In a room where everyone is sitting and eating, the standing man stood out. I watched him. From the light and the resolution of the cameras, I wasn't able to identify the individual. The resolution of the positioning system of his phone wouldn't resolve itself to less than the space of the room. But his body language was one of someone recovering from a hard night on the town, which his tracking data verified. He had been in motion since I started tracking his phone. I watched as a waiter brought him a takeout box, which from the way he shifted it from hand to hand had to be very hot. He said something to the waiter and headed toward the front of the building, into the bar with its restocking bartenders. I kept a window opened on the tea room while I followed him out the front door and across the street on the bar cameras. He walked into traffic and out of frame as, in the other window, the waiter moved to the point-of-sale register and played with it for a few seconds. Taking this as my cue, I opened the sales database for the red square and read the entry. The breakfast was an unremarkable assemblage of fried meats, potatoes, and cheese. The payment notation caught my attention. Wastage 17. Wastage 4 was Leo. That I knew from examining his drink receipts. Wastage 17 was another beast altogether. Wastage 17 never ordered alcohol. Wastage 17 never ordered drinks. Wastage 17 only ordered meals to go. 3 meals a day on a clockwork regular schedule was Wastage 17's order of the day. Another interesting bit about the meals was that they never varied. Ever. I filtered out every entry under Wasted 17 and discovered another interesting fact. Wasted 17 started ordering the repetitive meals 3 days after Frankie died. I leaned back and thought about the tidbits buried in the red square's purchase system. 3 days after I disappeared, a mysterious individual began to receive meals with clockwork precision. The meals were always takeout, never a receipt for dine-in. I leaped conclusions as if they were hurdles in a race. At the end was my answer. The meals were for Nona. I checked the location of mysterious Stranger 2. He was across the street. His location nearly on top of David's. He was in the nesting doll. I laughed hard. Stars ran before my eyes. My shunt monitoring routine showed the shunts operating at maximum and losing the race against the blood leaking into my brain. I had to relax. I had to breathe and think without aggravating my condition. I laid back and thought through what Ferran had said. Last week, when you were sick, Leo took Nona to the nesting doll. I'm sorry. What an idiot I had been! A dozen hacks to find out what an old man knew days, or was it weeks ago? I checked the receipts from the red square. It had been weeks, just under 3 weeks. I checked a calendar. It was a little over 2 weeks before Christmas. That day meant something to me, but I couldn't grasp what it was. The aphasia shark was moving in closer. I had to relax. I had to get it under control. I was so close. Or was I just as far away as I was before? I was close. I knew it. Because even though Stranger 2's phone couldn't resolve his location to less than 10 yards, it did allow me to limit the number of floors I had to search to find Nona. She was somewhere within 3 floors of where Subject 2's location data showed him. I called up the city's building information database and found the building had 35 floors. Stranger 2 appeared to be on the 34th floor. I only had 5 floors to check instead of 7. I reached for my sedative water and found it empty. I crushed another sedative and mixed another glass of liquid relaxation. I laid back and forced myself to breathe deeply. I pictured my happy place, as the meditation forums recommended, and fought to lower my blood pressure and relax. It didn't work. It never worked. Every time I closed my eyes and pictured North Lake in the spring, the soft hum of a boat's screw as the pilot pushed us out from shore, past the buoys, and into the open lake, I would think of Frankie. I'd be lying there on the deck, the soft breezes blowing across me, the shadow of the naked mast above me, and I'd think, it's about time we put up the sails and became real sailors. Then I'd say, who's we? More of a statement than a question. But the vision's answer never satisfied me. My mind said Nona would help. My heart remembered this place as it had been, me sunning on the deck while Frankie played captain. He fretted over the pilot and the rigging, dreaming of the day he could live on the water instead of renting a boat for a hard-won vacation. The sail would climb the mast, its shadow blocking out my sun. I would open my eyes and find myself back on that rooftop. Needles of silver would cut through Frankie as he hoisted the sail. As his body disintegrated, he'd look at me and mouth soundlessly a single word. Why? I'd jerk up, my vital signs spiking through the roof. I'd be alone in my bunk, the glare of my television-turned computer monitor glaring at me in the darkness of my cell. They say doing the same thing and expecting different results is a sign of insanity. They were right. I was insane. And even knowing the outcome, I did the same thing over and over again. Firmware, Proxy, is the second book in the Firmware pentology. That's 5 books, if you must know. It begins moments after Firmware Hijacked ends. So if you haven't heard or read Firmware Hijacked, this would be a good time to head on over to Colbyjack.net and either download the podcast on the audio side, read the episodes on the visual side, or download the Colbyjack Sunday Reader issues 1 through 20 in your choice of either EPUB or Mobi. Firmware Hijacked and Proxy are both available in ebook versions from our store at shop.colbyjack.net, amazon.com, and Barnes & Noble. Just search for Colbytrax. That's Colbytrax. Colbyjack.net. I'm the only one. A complete audiobook version of both Firmware Hijacked and Proxy is available for download through our shop as well. If you don't need any stuff, but would like to support our work, drop on by Colbyjack.net and hit the pretty little donate button conveniently located on the right-hand side of the blog roll. If you're on a smaller screen, the button will be found at the bottom of the page. Firmware Proxy is released under a Creative Commons, non-commercial, attribution, share-alike 3.0 license. Do what you want with it, just don't sell it, and always tell people where it came from. If you received this from a friend and want more information about Colbyjack.net and our split personality website, just drop on over to Colbyjack.net and select either the audio or visual side. The audio side carries our podcast, while the visual side carries our writings. Whichever side catches your fancy is fine with us. We're of two minds about the whole thing anyway. If you want to get social with me, I do mostly Twitter. So if you do the tweets and want to follow me, I'm Colbytrax. Spelled the same as above, Colbytrax. We could sing that all night long. Thank you once again and have a wonderful week.